Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Samueli, and with me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, last week we had the G20 foreign ministers meeting, at which the G7 crowd, particularly the representatives of the United States, Blinken, and the representative of the United Kingdom, Liz Truss, before she had to fly back because of the political crisis in London. But anyway, they pointedly refused to be in the same room as Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov. And of course, didn't want to pose for a collective photograph, didn't want to shake hands and all the rest. But of course, the G20 meetings went off all the same. Most of the members of the G20, in other words, everyone who's not a member of the G7, did not take the G7's view of what's going on in Ukraine on board. They simply did not accept their interpretation of events. And above all, they didn't think that they had or were coming up with any sort of a solution to the problems of food shortages and global inflation. So the EU High Commissioner or High Representative for Foreign Affairs, so he's the foreign minister of the European Union, who attended the G20 foreign ministers meeting, Josep Borrell, about whom we've already spoken a number of times. He has gone to his blog and has written a blog about his impressions of what happened at the G20 meeting. And he is very, very angry and frustrated that his view did not prevail. So I just want to read a few excerpts from his delightful...
Always entertaining. Always.
Yeah, yes, exactly. From his blog and...
Borrell blog. Okay.
Yes, let's work for it, yeah. Sorry, let me... you know, these things... let me sorry, now... So that was.
And he wrote it did he write it in English? Because he's considered a polyglot, though I have always highlighted that he doesn't make any sense in any language.
He is a polyglot. So that is right. Yes. Okay. So this now should get this.
Just a minute.
All right. So here we have. It says here the main takeaway is that in abstract terms, he has a problem with speaking or writing clearly. So, you know, he says in abstract terms, everybody agrees on the need for multilateralism and defending principles such as territorial sovereignty and the non-use of force. However, this often looks different when it must become concrete. So, you know, abstract, concrete, and, you know, you're already kind of getting a little dizzy with all these big words, such as on the fallout from Russia's unprovoked war against Ukraine. The hard truth is that national interests often outweigh general commitments to bigger ideals. Now, you notice the use of the word unprovoked. The media and all the various European officials like to use that word unprovoked, and it's a tell. It's a classic tell, because they really want to persuade the world that it was unprovoked, whereas, you know, the one thing you can't describe it is unprovoked. I mean, everybody knows it was provoked. I mean, even those who might say that, you know, it wasn't justified, they would still say it's provoked. I mean, you know, like our friend Jeffrey Roberts, who thought it was unjustified, he did still nonetheless say, yeah, it was provoked. But it's very important for them to say it's unprovoked.
Yeah, well, they're creating an artificial binary. Okay, right. The problem is that it can be necessarily wrong, but it certainly can be provoked. Okay, yes. They both can exist in an equal, in a logical sense.
But it's very important for them to use this, because of course, if they admit that it was provoked, then of course, essentially they would have to admit to their own culpability, which of course they have to, which is that you know, they spent years and years provoking this. So that's why it's very important, you know, that's why it's very interesting they have to use this word unprovoked, because otherwise you are culpable. I mean, there's no question, and NATO of course is culpable.
Well, if you could just stay there real quick here,
Mhm.
there's nothing abstract about having a commitment to your own national interest. That's not an abstraction. But he does that.
Yes,
He's saying that is an abstraction, but it's
right,
not. It's a
right.
hard truth.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
again, Borrell is very challenged
Mental.
linguistic. And because he's linguistically challenged, we
Right.
have to conclude he may most likely be intellectually challenged.
I think so. And then says, before elaborating on this, let me briefly summarize what I focused on during the ministerial sessions. And then he goes on, multilateralism. And then he says, and then he again uses that expression, this unprovoked war constitutes a blatant violation of international law, contravening the basic tenets of the UN Charter and endangering global economic recovery. I stressed again that this is not a, quote, European war, unquote, but an international conflict that concerns the whole world. In the face of aggression, no one can be neutral. No one can live safely in a world where illegal use of force is normalized or tolerated.
Well, that's his narrative, and that's the whole point. He's very disappointed that his narrative, the European Union's narrative, hasn't gotten traction. Okay, so I mean, talking about violating the UN Charter, you and I can talk until everyone is blue in the face. Okay, it's since its inception, and we could go to every single conflict. But the thing that he already twice he talks about multilateralism, but I'm not really sure if he thinks it's a good idea or a bad idea or it exists.
Right. Well,
What's your sense?
that's the point. That of course, he doesn't really believe in multilateralism. He just simply believes, well, everybody has to accept our EU, NATO view of the world. But multilateralism, if it means anything, means, hey, there has to be a shared point of view. Therefore, you're going to have to. There's going to be give and take, and we're not all going to be thinking alike. And I think he's getting frustrated because he goes there, and lo and behold, all the members of the G20, they're just not buying it. They simply are not buying. I mean, remember, the Americans wanted Lavrov disinvited. So that was quickly, shut down. And so that any disinviting of Russia. And so he comes along and says, "Well, this is not a European war, but an international conflict." Okay,
But the world doesn't agree.
The world doesn't agree, and of course they will say, and of course others say, "Well, I mean, I don't know. It was only a few years ago you launched an invasion of Iraq." Now I don't know what Borrell was saying that, wow, but I was opposed to the war, like I was opposed to the war in Iraq, whatever. But
okay, well, what about Libya? What about Syria?
Exactly,
what about
exactly.
I mean,
exactly, and that's the point. I mean, you've been doing this for year after year, and then ignoring all the UN Charter, and now suddenly you're invoking, the UN Charter. And as we've discussed many times before, the Russians themselves are invoking the UN Charter to justify their special military operation. They say, hey, this is Article 51. These are, these people's republics have a right to self-defense. So, but anyway, so he goes on and then says, during the second session on addressing food and energy security, despite a broad agreement on the need to solve these twin crises, ministers disagreed on how to address this matter and who is responsible for the current and upcoming challenges. I stressed once more that despite all the propaganda and lies coming from the Kremlin, this food crisis is not caused by the EU or the international sanctions. We do not target the agricultural sector in Russia, nor do we prohibit the imports of Russian agricultural goods and fertilizers, nor the payment of such products. It is Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine that is dramatically aggravating the food crisis. And of course, we've talked about this many times before, and then it is a totally nonsensical, idiotic, ridiculous claim, and they weren't buying it. I mean, it's like, you impose these sanctions, on Russia, their inability to conduct normal trade, their inability to get insurance for their shipping. Their ships are banned from European ports. Oh, we don't sanction food. Oh, no, we don't sanction. So the Russians are lying. I mean, again, it's no surprise that no one was buying his line.
Well, it's interesting that he has to keep saying it, George. It's like if I say it enough times and loud enough, you might start believing me.
Right.
It's like when you're speaking to someone that doesn't understand English, people tend to raise their voice and repeat themselves, okay, as if that makes it more understandable. Okay, and so Borrell is in a very strong state of denial because he knows that because of the sanctions and secondary sanctions, they killed agricultural trade around the world, and they are solely responsible for it. Do you think Russia, under sanction, being denied access to the international financial system, wants to cut itself off from this very lucrative sector of the economy? Of course not. Russia is the most important agricultural exporter in the world. Okay, yeah. So I mean, if there were a way, they would do it. But companies that say, it's really changed in our lifetime, George. People don't fear the Department of Defense or the Department of State. They fear the Treasury Department. That is where the muscle is. And they've seen what the Treasury Department has done after successive administrations of you deal with the Iranians, you deal with Syria, you deal with Serbia, you deal with, and people just say no, because they're not there in every single large business, there is risk analysis, and the risk analysis person will say, don't do it. Don't even get near it. We'll get caught in their net.
That's right. That's exactly right. And that's it. And I think in one of his press conference that I think we discussed, he kind of blurted this out, well, that there's a fear factor involved. Oh, well, some buyers fear sanctions, and so therefore they are reticent to make purchases. Yeah, that's the point about sanctions, that it immediately has an effect on everybody. People are terrified of getting caught up in sanctions. So it's again, it's stupid. Well, we didn't actually sanction this. Yeah, but everybody's terrified. They don't want their bank accounts frozen. And of course, every other country immediately gets frightened because they think, hey, there are food shortages, so we're cutting off all food exports. That's it. Like India said, well, we're not exporting any food because we're afraid of a food shortage. So it has an immediate knock-on effect.
They, of course, did not think this out in their excited state. They wanted to do as much damage as possible against Russia, and they didn't realize the law of unintended consequences. I mean, this is really a ship of fools. They have created such a mess for themselves, right. And because of their level of hubris, they cannot admit that they made one single mistake.
That's right. That's right. And then he goes on, Russia has invaded the breadbasket of the world.
What?
It's a bread basket. Russia exports twice as much grain as Ukraine exports. I mean, so their whole idea, this is the breadbasket of the world. And it's turning the shipping lanes of the Black Sea into a war zone while blocking 20 million tons of grain in Ukrainian storage facilities. So he's still running with this 20 million tons of grain that are in these.
Ukraine has never exported 20 million tons.
No, and we already know they've been shipping this grain out by rail. I mean, this has been going on the Danube. I mean, there can't still be 20 million tons in these Ukrainian storage facilities. And again, in terms of the global food production, 20 million tons is just nothing. Yeah. I mean, it's like the whole idea that we have global food shortage right now is because of this 20 million tons that's so stuck, allegedly stuck in these storage facilities. I mean, it's laughable. It's less than 1% of all world grain production.
It's much akin to when Biden released the oil from the strategic reserve, and some of it ended up in China. That is like a teaspoon in a pot. Okay, it wouldn't have changed the impact whatsoever, the price, but people run with it and exaggerate it. Okay, why it got to China is another question, but it didn't change the calculus of the oil market whatsoever.
Not whatsoever. Yeah. And it says, this is a deliberate attempt to use food as a weapon against the most vulnerable countries in the world, especially in Africa. So here he's kind of doing a bit of demagoguery. And the interesting thing is the demagoguery just didn't work. In other words, he's saying Russia is deliberately attempting to use food as a weapon against the most vulnerable countries in the world, especially Africa. And lo and behold, the people who were listening, they didn't buy it. No, I don't think that's what's going on here. So, but hey, you're not buying into my demagoguery. Russia is using food as a weapon against the most vulnerable people in the world.
George, it's just, you kind of wonder Africa believing its former colonial masters, okay? I know, we kind of heard these stories before from you people, like, oh, don't worry, independence, you'll still have control over your economy. Oh, and your financial system, as long as it's in French francs, you will be fine, all of your money will go through Paris, everything will be fine. We would never threaten that flow of money. I mean, you think African leaders are going to say, yeah, I think you got a point there, Mr. Borrell? No, I don't think that they would trust him as far as they can throw these people. And that's just not on this issue.
That's always a kind of an amusing angle to it, is whenever these G7, every one of whom is a former colonial master. I mean, it's like, so, and it's like, well, the French, the British, the Italians, the Germans, the Japanese, obviously. I mean, but every one of those are, well, trust us. We're on your side. It says, according to the UN today, 1.2 billion people are subject to a perfect storm because they are severely exposed to the combination of rising food prices, rising energy prices, and tightening of financial conditions. In the energy sector, the real reasons for high prices and a tight market are artificial supply shortages, especially of gas, caused once more by Russia. Had nothing to do with our sanctions. The sixth wave of sanctions, no, had nothing whatever to do with any of that. No. The fact that we were going to do was the mother of all sanctions we were going to impose. Had nothing whatever to do with any of that. It's all Russia's doing it.
It's kind of like the EU is a doctor and it gave 6 major injections, these 6 inoculations, and then the patient starts dying. Oh, we had nothing to do with that. It's completely, beside the point. Exactly. I mean, this is exactly what it is.
Right. And then, of course, we must act as the EU and as the international community to address food and energy. However, the quickest solution remains in the hands of one man, President Putin, who has the power to stop his senseless war and avoid a global food and energy calamity. I don't understand it. Well, why isn't the first thing is for you just to lift the sanctions? I mean, if they just lift the sanctions, that's it. I mean, it's like, why is it up to him? To do them. You're the one who resorted to the economic weapon. I mean, so why?
But another angle of that is, let's say Putin stops the conflict in Ukraine. And then Borrell said, see, we stopped them, and then all the more reasons to keep those sanctions.
Exactly. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. That's exactly the argument that, that's it. We won. That's it. We got what we wanted. Now we must tighten the sanctions. That's exactly what we used to say. And then discussing these issues during the 2 sessions and my bilateral meetings gave me a better understanding where different countries stand. Indeed, in the March vote at the UN General Assembly, 140 states condemned the Russian aggression, and no member of the G-20, apart from the aggressor, opposed the resolution. But on how to move forward and on the consequences of war, views differ sharply. The G7 and like-minded countries are united in condemning and sanctioning Russia and in trying to hold the regime accountable. But other countries, and we can speak here of the majority of the global South, often take a different perspective. So he goes on about these 140 states that voted, for this resolution, completely non-binding resolution, which doesn't mean anything. And then he said, well, none of them opposed it. Well, talk about clinging to straws, where you got India and China that didn't vote for it. That's 3 billion of the world's population already taken care of. Indonesia, I can't remember whether Indonesia voted for it or abstained.
I don't think it did, but okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't remember. But you're talking about a large group. I don't think Pakistan voted for it. I'm sure Pakistan also abstained. So you don't have countries with big population, and so but he's saying, well, okay, but they didn't vote against it. Oh, all right. Well, if you're happy with that, then then go with it.
Well, again, the European Union, and this is really it's really a sad commentary of where we are, because they still think that they have numerical sway, which they don't, and then then the moral card comes out. It doesn't play, and then they're saying, they try to play international law, and if you're in the global South, well, maybe Russia shouldn't have done what it did, but the United States invaded Iraq and we didn't see 6 packages of sanctions. So, I mean, some great powers are allowed to do things and other great powers aren't. And so you're just arbitrary about it. And by the way, in the meantime, we got business to do. Because of your sanctions, our people may be at risk with food insecurity, energy insecurity, and we're not going to make it worse. Okay, that's the situation they're taking.
That's right. And that's why you're entirely preoccupied with just accusing Russia, whereas it was the Indonesia, saying, well, we got to kind of work out some sort of a solution. We need to address these problems. No, we just want to go around moralizing and blaming Russia. So, yeah, that's why, your voice just didn't get the hearing and the respect that you expected.
And also, I think it's very important, maybe you'll show it in the next few slides, but I was reading some accounts of the G7 foreign ministries meeting, and there was some consternation that, why is Zelensky talking to us? Because this is the G20. He's not in the G20. Why is these Western powers, friends of the United States, forcing this issue upon us? They did come to a non-binding resolution that, they respecting the sovereignty of Ukraine. That was it. Okay, because the Western powers, the G7, wanted to go further, and they'll say, no, this is as far as we're going to go. Okay, but having Zelensky on the screen again is that, we didn't come here to meet to talk about Ukraine. We've come here to talk about global problems. I think that's what the G20 was supposed to be, because for the global South, most of the problems the world experiences comes from decisions made by the G7.
That's right. Yeah. And then he says, in principle, everyone condemns the attack on a country's territorial integrity and sovereignty. But when it comes to naming the aggressor and stating who is responsible for the consequences, the only topic that I'm interested in, many are reticent for different reasons. Some are more concerned about the consequences of the war for themselves. Well, that's outrageous.
Wow. Well, they finally learned what national interest means. Good.
Rather than about who's responsible for these difficulties. Again, the only topic I'm interested in, and how to end this war. Others complain about, quote, double standards, unquote. So that's an interesting one, double standard. In other words, some people kind of presumably raised with Borrell, yeah, what about these double standards? I mean, America invaded Iraq. We didn't have no stinking 6 rounds of sanctions. We didn't have all these votes in the United Nations. Why are we suddenly supposed to be suffering because of this? But when it's America invades Iraq, hey, ho hum, nothing doing. Double standards. He obviously didn't like hearing about these double standards. Simply want to
Keep going.
No, or simply want to preserve their good bilateral relationship with Russia. And many remain vague and not wanting to take sides because this would jeopardize their geopolitical interests. I mean, how disgusting. I'm so disgusting. These people, they want to maintain good bilateral relations with Russia. They're thinking about their geopolitical interests. I'm disgusted. I'm absolutely disgusted.
Yeah, Borrell is disgusted that the global South wants to take care of their own position in the world. Because you know what, George? They're coming up. When you look at projections across the board, the productivity, growth, increases in standard of living, That's not happening in the European Union, okay?
Right.
It's happening everywhere else in the world. And the absolute hubris of these former colonial powers, scolding their lessers by not doing what they're bidding. I mean, that's beyond double standards, okay? You can't, no person in standing can say these things with a straight face, but Borrell apparently thinks he can.
And then he goes, the global battle of narratives is in full swing. And for now, we are not winning. Oh, I feel really bad. I mean, all this money that you have invested in public relations. I mean, can you imagine how much money the EU invests in PR? And it's always endlessly churning out all their papers and whatnot. And we are not winning. And again, imagine the media, the global media are run by the Western powers. CNN, BBC, New York Times, Washington Post. I mean, the Times of London. These are all the Western media outlets. And it says we are not winning the battle of narratives. As the EU, we have to engage further to refute Russian lies and war propaganda, making it clear who's responsible for the aggression and hence its consequences. We need to show solidarity with the victim while helping in a concrete and visible way those who are most affected by the fallout of Putin's threat for war, but that somehow look to Russia for help. And then the course of the...
Real quick here. Just to kind of reiterate what George says, the vast majority of influencing media, if I can put it that way, is Western owned, okay, by far, okay? And let's look at the resources that Russia has. It has RT, it has Sputnik.
Which are banned in the European Union. I mean, I don't know what and in the UK, I don't know about what the United States, but I think it's quite hard to get in the United States.
This is not a competition, but they can't win. Their narrative can't win.
Right.
Despite the fact of their vast resources. Mr. Borrell, maybe because it's just not a very good narrative. Okay, right. I mean, I don't know, maybe kind of speak the obvious here.
That's right. So the course of the G20 meeting was quite telling. We are always serious about our multilateral engagement and we show respect for the opinions of others. This was not the case of Russia. Foreign Minister Lavrov left the G20 meeting right after his intervention in the first session. He did not even bother to listen to what others had to say. That decision tells you all you need to know about how much Russia really cares about multilateral fora. Fora, you're using this pretentious plural of forum. I hope that some G20 members that are sitting on the fence with respect to the war in Ukraine took good note.
They did take note. They did take note. And the thing was that, again, the G7 elements within G20 very forcibly foisted that issue on the G20 and people took note. Yes, they did. They took note because what Borrell wants to do, we want you to support us even against your own interests, okay? Right. Who cares if your people starve to death? Who cares if you can't turn on the light at night? Who cares if you have no air conditioning? You're doing the right thing.
Right.
This is absurd. I mean, even a 3-year-old wouldn't go along with it.
That's right. That's right. And his claim, which is, but this is aggression and this is a violation of the UN Charter. And therefore, this is of interest to all of humanity. It's not just a European war. Because then, of course, raises the issues which everyone else is going to raise. Yeah, but I mean, what have you been doing in Ukraine all these years? I mean, it's not like, this came out of the blue. And they know this. I mean, you've got someone like Modi. I mean, you think Modi's an idiot? He's going to just go and buy this nonsense? Yeah, well, we kind of know what NATO's been doing all these years. I mean, you have been essentially creating an armed aircraft carrier on Russia's borders. What do you think was going to happen?
Yeah, and Modi, saying, I mean, Ukraine, that's far away from my country. I mean, we've had good relations with Russia. We're in BRICS with them, by the way, which BRICS, what is it? Iran and Argentina wants to join. I mean, this is during all these, wave after wave of sanctions, and people are raising their arms saying, hey, can we join your club? Okay.
Right. Yeah. No, that's right. But it's very funny. when we go through Borrell, because he wants to sound like a liberal. You know, that's the interesting thing about him, is that he wants to be a kind of the good liberal. You know, I'm really on your side. I'm on the side of the poor. I'm on the side of the global south. You know, so join us. The bad guy is Putin, bad guy is Russia. So come on over. And no one's buying it. So that's why it's just very funny to listen to him, because his arguments are so weak. I mean, when somebody like Liz Truss, I mean, Liz Truss doesn't even pretend anything. I mean, she's just simply, goes on to this hysterical tirade, and she makes no attempt to persuade anyone. But because Borrell is trying to do this, it's just something very funny, because his arguments are so ludicrously weak.
Yeah, well, Liz Truss is like a barista, okay? You have to buy this coffee, okay? And you have no other choice. Now pay for it, okay? There are no options here, because she's so intellectually challenged. There are no options in her mind, because she's ideologically possessed. But Borrell is a very different animal, because Borrell wants to sound liberal, but the more he tries to do that, and I usually don't use this word, the more he's an imperialist, okay? The more he's a neo-colonialist, okay? And he and I think he's conscious of it in his writing, because he's trying to show empathy. But when someone's trying to convince you through empathy, that means you've got to get your guard up. Okay?
Exactly.
That's exactly how these people play all of the time.
But that's the thing. That's what people like Borrell don't really understand, is that when you adopt this patronizing tone, hey, I'm really on your side. I'm trying to help you out. The person who's supposed to be your client is kind of wondering, why is he doing this for me? I mean, I wouldn't do it for him, so why is he doing it for me? He obviously has some kind of an agenda, and that's the point. That's what was, the patron, the problem of the patron, the savior. Oh, I'm coming here to save you. I'm coming here to champion your cause. You kind of wonder, why? Why are you championing my cause?
Yeah, I mean, a few generations ago, you arbitrarily created borders in my country that we've had to deal with ever since. Okay, you didn't take notice that there's a lot of different kinds of people where I live right now. But your great grandfather did that, and I'm supposed to trust you?
Yes,
okay?
yes, right.
I mean, the thing is that I'm on your side and we can help you. That line of argument is a dead letter. What you have to do is, what is far more effective is a demonstration effect, and create a bandwagon where people want to join you. But see, this is just this old mindset, we know better for you, patting them on the head.
That's
okay.
Right. That's right.
But then, India say, well, our economy is only up and up, and we got a lot of stuff going through. We put stuff in space. Hey, UK, when's the last time you did that? Okay. Yeah. I mean, living here in Russia, I've come across many, super successful Indian businessmen. I mean, you don't trifle with these people. Okay. Right. One thing I'll say, they do like the old British school curricula, and they say in Moscow there are even these kind of schools, because they actually teach them how to read, write, and arithmetic. Okay.
Right. No, that's a very interesting aspect.
Isn't that they don't need to learn?
They've retained their old that British curriculum, and that whole British education system, O levels and A levels, all of that. It's got, which is really amusing. They have more respect for that traditional British curriculum than the British themselves do. Yes.
No, but see, this shows the incredible shrinking world of in the minds of the Borrells of Europe. They know, and I know they say they know to themselves that they have actually wrecked the global economy. And they don't have the fortitude to admit they made a mistake. Right. Because like I said, if Russia were to somehow compromise, which I don't see that is even a remote possibility, they're going to continue with these sanctions anyway. Right. It's regime change and the breakup of Russia. Those are the two goals.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah. Well, that's Borrell.
Bravo, Borrell. You always entertain us. Okay.
Exactly. Always, yes. We've done a number of these videos about Borrell because it's just too good to pass up.
It's too good. It is too good. The incredible shrinking Borrell. Okay. That's right. It'll be an action doll. It'll be like this big. Okay.
That's it. Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
All right, everybody, this is Peter and George on The Gaggle. We're on Local, so please go to thegaggle.locals.com. Please visit our store. Today is Monday, and I know everyone's, crossed off in their calendar George's live stream tomorrow.
Exactly. There's a real panic is setting in with Joe Rogan. He said, "What are we going to do?" There's a crisis among his business staff. So that's on Tuesday, 3 p.m. Eastern time. Please join me live stream here at Locals. And on the way out, think of little buddy. Look how depressed he is. Think about that little tip jar of his. Got a few bob in your pocket, whip it out, thong it in the tip jar, and that'll put a smile on his face. So remember, we're very, very grateful for all of your help and friendship and support. And the more you're able to donate, the more of these videos we can make, the more we can invest in improved technology, and above all, the happier Buddy will be. So remember, if you like The Gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.